All right, so now what we're going to do is you should have had good discussions in your roles, at your tables, and we're going to turn it over to the panel now and talk to them about what's in their head from their experience. What would they be thinking about? What would they be typing down? And who are they contacting first? So you've already had this discussion at your table. Now we're going to see what the panel says so you can check yourselves.
What's up, Nikki? What you thinking?
Endpoint security management, so my team, security engineers. My systems team, what servers are tied to the DMV. Network engineer, can we contain the network? On the phone with my IT director as well via Teams meeting, and then the director of clerk and recorder.
And then what I would do is I would think about, or are the key stakeholders involved? Like, does my CIO, CISO know? Does my CPO know? And do I need to connect with our communications director since it's been so public? And then also the subject matter experts leadership, because I think that it's important when there's a crisis that the leadership knows so that we can develop an emergency task force to address it.
Something I want you all to notice about the difference in their answers so far. Nikki is heading this up from a county perspective, where something like this is very, very real, could happen, but she's going very tactical. She's already getting specific teams lined up and ready, whereas Nancy's coming at it from that legal procurement perspective and getting those contracts and making sure the right people are in the room and are notified. Let's see where it varies on to Mandy.
Okay. So, my role as state CIO, the first things that I'm really thinking in is first, contacting, obviously, the CISO, folks over operations, but I want to know, and what was running through my mind is who's next? Is this the only one? What else do we need to do? Is this something, at this point in time, when am I escalating to the governor? When are we, or we're probably already fielding calls more than likely from folks in the legislative branch instantly, because these are things that their constituents who are standing in line, who can't get this done, they're going to call their member, who's then going to call us. And so trying to, one, assess the impact and how to manage those with those outside folks, but also who's next.
All right, Mike?
Mike Centrella, head of public policy for Security Scorecard, recently retired as assistant director of the U.S. Secret Service, where I oversaw investigations across the country, cyber investigations across the world for the Secret Service. And the first question I'm going to have is this criminal activity limited to the DMV, or is it expanded, or is there some kind of other criminal activity that's expanding across or attacking critical infrastructure? And what kind of monitoring do you have in place that would show us that it's impacting other agencies, other vendors, or is this just limited to the DMV? So, thank you.
So what would you say is your most urgent unanswered question that you have right now, panel?
I would say just identifying what, following up from both what Amanda and Michael had said is, number one, we need some communication with the state. I'm very close with our state CISO, so I'd reach out to her immediately during this. But then also, what type of threat actors are we dealing with? Do we have any information? And at this point, I don't know that they would have this information. Of course, I would communicate with my clerk and recorder. We'd always, when we activate our cyber incident response plan, OEM is already looped in, so is our PIO for the county and the sheriff's office as well. But they can start prioritizing internal, external communications regarding the media. I think right now it's really making sure that the state of Colorado's computers with the DMV within our clerk and recorder are isolated from our network and are contained. And then we'll work with the director of the clerk and recorders to start communications to the public, and then also coordinate with our state CISO. And then, as Michael had said, your federal partners reach out to U.S. Secret Service. Hey, have you heard about this?
Yeah, and one of the things that, from a law enforcement perspective, what we're going to look at is going to be probably in contrast with what the state is going to want to be doing is collection of evidence and preserving evidence. And we're going to probably talk about that more as we go along today, but that's something that's going to be a dark line or that fight between getting back up on and running and what we need to preserve evidence to continue our investigations.
So you don't want us to wipe the computer?
No. Let us do that.
I want to know who the first stakeholder is. You've kind of mentioned a few that you phoned a friend really quick. What about some of the rest of you? Who are you phoning? Who's the friend that you need to get a hold of right away?
For me, I'm going to reach out to the head of the DMV in our environment and talk
Business unit.
and let them know, we're here, we're on this. Again, we have a federated environment in Texas with our state agencies, so every state, every jurisdiction is going to be a little bit different. But reach out, if nothing else, just to see, here to help. What can we do? Start doing those things. Our teams are engaged, but you can always just call me and have a business-to-business discussion. I also would do that to find out who they have reached out to. So there's not duplicate information or conflicting information that's going up to our governor's office or to others in state leadership to make sure we're on the same page in communicating an effective strategy.
Love that coordination. How many of you out at the tables, raise of hands, how many of you reached out to the business unit? They might have known before, but to Mandy's point, coordinating those efforts and who is going to talk to that elected official, who's going to be that voice who's giving the information so it's not conflicting, so it's not duplicated. That's one of the reasons reaching out to that business unit and coordinating those efforts from the get-go is so important.
And then while they're doing the behind the scenes from the business perspective, what we'll want to do is with the services that's been identified, we'll want to see if there's any existing cooperative agreements with vendors that have the skill set to provide the coverage while we're at this standstill, and making sure that behind the scenes we're connecting with our legal department to make sure there's money there to have the contract. And if we aren't able to leverage existing cooperative agreements or master agreements, we might have to go into the path of an emergency single source, which then we would loop in our CPO to ensure that behind the scenes we're able to move forward and contract with the appropriate vendor to address the situation.
So that you're ready to support whatever ask is coming out of the incident team. Perfect. All right, let's escalate it.
All right, well, one thing I'd say, so one of the things we talked about is an instinct that you try to avoid. And one of the things I've seen, especially in incidents where there's people involved that don't have a lot of experience with incidents, is that their knee-jerk reaction is to start trying to attribute blame. Say, oh, this is North Korea, or this is, whoever, Cozy Bear. And I think it's important to not start jumping in too soon of who you think is doing this and start working the problems. You've all heard the phrase fog of war. Well, in the beginning, there's going to be a lot of stuff you don't really know. You might think something is true, and later on you're going to find out it's not true. So it's very important to work with facts and not speculations. Okay, so now we're going to go into the next scenario, or the next event, and this is the escalation event. And the escalation event, cybersecurity, okay, so your cybersecurity vendor confirms ransomware is spreading through the full scope. Oh, though the full scope is unknown, sorry. So ransomware is spreading, you don't know what the full scope is, and headlines read, hackers freeze state DMV ahead of weekend travel. Lawmakers demand immediate updates. Rumors surface that the driver's license data may have been stolen.
So decide your priorities, both on the public sector side and the private sector partners that are here at the table. Weigh transparency versus a controlled message, because people want answers, but also you want to make sure they're truthful. Determine whether or not to escalate to federal partners and which federal partners you might bring in and why. Do you have cyber insurance? When or how do we connect with them? Is it time to have a conversation there yet? And have we all called our legal friends yet? Discuss, talk amongst yourselves. Give you about 5-6 minutes. What's in your head? How are you managing competing priorities under this kind of pressure?
Well, I'll jump in real quick. As someone who's lived through a major incident, I can relate to some of this. So back in 2019, there was a ransomware event that impacted 23 local governments across Texas. And, so all of this hits very close to home, and we had some lessons learned, which I'm always happy to share on that. So, where this is coming from is, we were in it, and all my experiences from that. Thankfully, the team had a great plan that had been practiced, importantly, and we were able to put it in place. But one of the things, from the media and the communication standpoint is you don't want to be the headline on Drudge. You don't, we were in the Daily Mail, which I guess that's better than for some other scandalous thing I figured I would have done, but there you are. And so all the calls that come in, and one of the things, and talking about this on the press releases, is so it's 23 local governments across Texas. None of them are under our authority. We're just supporting them. And we're talking sheriffs, counties, cities, all, an assortment of folks who are now getting pinged for their own media requests. So the position that we found ourselves in addition to helping with the incident response from our state operations center, was now we were statewide comms for all of these entities. And it actually turned out to be extremely helpful, and they were grateful for that. So they would send us their media requests. We drafted one statement, so we were speaking with one voice. Now there were some who just chose to ignore it, because they didn't want to identify themselves, and that was
She's
okay
up for
too.
election right now, so she's got to say what she's got to say.
But yeah, so putting this out there and having this unified front in the communications was extremely important for us from a response standpoint.
Mandy and I were talking during the discussion, and this is a DMV system, so from a county perspective, this is a state-impacted system, I should say, or state-affected system that connects to all the counties within Colorado. So the one thing I want to make sure that I do is communicate with the CISO up at the state of Colorado to get the communication that is coming from the state of Colorado so that we too can then provide that same communication. Because the minute that a municipality or a county starts to convey their own messaging, now you have two messages, and that's where that misinformation or even disinformation can start to happen pretty rapidly. And make sure that you have insurance. I don't know if Dan Lorman's in here, but he recently posted the article about Jaguar Land Rover. I am shocked that they did not have cyber insurance, and they are now in the hole $64 million a week to recover. Cyber insurance is big.
I want to touch on something Nikki just said. When you all are working in your day-to-day lives and we're trying to enhance the customer's experience, do you all get that the average constituent doesn't know or care whether it's the city, the county, or the state's thing? It's the government. It's all one to them. So pointing fingers, well, this isn't ours because it's theirs, does no good. Using that same consistent message will ensure that unified front back. All right, how else are we managing some of those competing priorities? Because now we've got the federales, Mike's up at your doorstep.
Well, as the former director of the Secret Service, if the FBI is calling, I would hang up and call somebody else. But no kidding. But the fact that the feds are calling, whether it's the Secret Service, whether it's the FBI, whether it's your local state agency calling you, I would say those playbooks should be written prior. They should know who to be calling. They should be knowing how you're going to come into that system and know who to be communicating with. It should not be a game day decision. This should have been worked out on tabletop exercises, pre-exercises, and all that should be communicated to include all the way down to the PIO. When I was in my role, I was able to force tabletop exercises across the state, across the country, and every time we did that, we also made sure that our PIO was involved in communication, because we don't want to be putting out a message different than what the state's putting out, or before or after. We understand that there's governors involved, there's senators involved, there's messaging that has to go out and transparency that has to go out. on the state side to protect itself, but it's also the same thing with the federal agencies. They have protect information that's going out, so we're not tipping off adversaries of TPPs and other actions that are in place that maybe slip through the cracks on a message that's going out through the state that's putting out this type of information. So we want to make sure that our PIOs and the comms teams are all in lockstep.
And something to piggyback off of Mike is, because I partner really closely with our U.S. Secret Service agents, we built our cyber incident response plan based off of the ICS structure, so that's that incident command structure. So you want to know what your essential functions that you're going to need to bring in, because a cyber event, and I'm sure that Mandy can elaborate here, but it's no different than the Spring Creek fire of 2018, where it burned over 300,000 acres, right? Within a matter of a couple months. You're going to have to bring in your financial teams, because when you start to bring in external partners to help you recover, if obviously right now for me this is an isolated incident, but if it were impacting Arapahoe County, I need my procurement, so we need to pay people. I need resource management, so we need to feed people. That's that logistics. You need your operational coordination, your planning section chief. I mean, you never know how big this incident is going to get. So to Mike's point, having a tabletop exercise is really crucial, because it really does educate your stakeholders on what is required for a large-scale event.
And part of our plan that we had in Texas is we leverage our Division of Emergency Management, who responds to all manners of emergencies and disasters in the state, and we were able to use their facility and their communications network to be able to respond to this quickly. And we had all of the partners in that state operations center together for this cyber incident. So we had FBI, DHS, our Department of Public Safety, our teams, everybody else who would have been directly impacted or would support any of those entities. We were all in that room together. And we stayed there for the full week while we were working this incident. And it was invaluable just to have you there. And then to a point about the importance, obviously, of pulling legal in, which we did right away, and procurement, that's one of the ways that we were actually able to help identify not only those who were impacted, but then the ones who may have been impacted, because our event was through an MSSP. And that entity, had a contract through us, through our agency. And so by going through the list of people who had purchased off of that contract, we were able then, because we knew who had been impacted, but there may have been others based on this customer list. So we had our procurement teams and our legal teams going through and then reaching out to folks to make sure, were they impacted, did they know, and see what other possible bits of evidence we could get from that why were these folks impacted when others weren't.
Hence, GovRAMP, FedRAMP, TexRAMP, Arizona ramp.
All the ramps, make them all happen. I think one thing you're hearing from each and every one of them, it's kind of a different perspective on it. Make sure your contracts are in order. Make sure your relationships are in order. Make sure this is in order. Make sure you've practiced it. The day of the event is way too late. Don't be making friends the day of. Don't be figuring out who these people are. Should already have those relationships, should already have those contracts, should already practice. How does this work? And let's see how we go. I think you had one.
Yeah, well, I agree with that. And you also want to learn how people communicate. You don't want to learn that in the middle of an emergency. Somebody might always be high-strung, or somebody might always be really chill, right? And when you're in an emergency, it shouldn't be the first time you're talking to them. You should have already had that communication channel. A lot of things you can do is set up standing work groups where you guys get together every 4 months or every 6 months and just talk about things. And it gets everybody to understand each other's capabilities. At the state of Montana, when I was the CISO there, we always followed the 4 C's: cooperation, communication, collaboration, and coordination.
And the 5th C is crap.
And that way, we were able to take everybody's assets and skills and harness them the best possible way.
Because you knew each other.
Yep, we knew.
That's a big point of it. For those of you who know me, that little kind of flip comment, that's normal. But if we're in the middle of an incident and tensions are already high, that could have come across really bad. That's why you've got to get to know the players that are going to be involved in the eventual incident ahead of time. So you know what's normal, and if I get a call in the middle of the night, whoa, that is not normal from this person, it must be serious.
Right.
And then something that Andy said, the tiering. You know, do you have your applications and systems tiered? And do you have a system service catalog for that? And then also your operational appetite and statement is something that I'm working on with Arapahoe. I just brought it up after Carnegie to my director. So, but we need to understand right now, what is our organizational risk, our financial risk, our reputational risk, our, I think I said financial, what other risks do we prioritize, right? And then that tiering is really important because what system is this? Is it a tier 3 or is it a tier 1 system? Because you'll have different RPOs and RTOs with that.
I've got some great news for you guys. The incident is contained. Yay, good job. No payment has been made, but there's always those but. Several DMV systems do remain offline. There are definitely service delays that are going into the next week. Forensic reviews confirm partial exfiltration of driver records. Public frustration is growing, and the media is highlighting the long-term trust issues. Take a look up at the board. There's a few different participant tasks there. Let's define when recovery begins, plan our long-term communication, assign accountability, and identify preventative measures. Going to give you about 8 whole minutes to figure that out. It's the first thing that you're putting on your after action report.
Well, I guess what's still keeping me up at night is, how are we going to, how do we address this in the future? Like, how are we able to stop, particularly, and I'm going back to the incident that happened for us. I mean, that's not something that was in our control, right? That's, and again, and talking about third-party risk and all of these other things, like, and yet it's the things you're not looking at and that you're not preparing for that can absolutely, take down a chunk of your state. And it was 23 entities that day. But what if it had been, 50, 100, 1,000? What would that have looked like? And so for the after action for us is it actually resulted in some really positive, forward-thinking legislation that was built off of the response to the event. So, for example, to help build out what are we going to do in the future for this. In addition, we looked at some of the models like Michigan has in building out a volunteer incident response team where we could pull on folks that could be background checked, ready to go from public and private sector who don't work for us, who are ready to go if the governor activates the cyber team if there was an incident. So we had that happen. We built out our regional security operations centers that are in partnership with the public universities. Texas is a big state, surprise. And inconveniently, these 23 entities were not all located just around Austin. We had them up in, the High Plains. We had them in West Texas. We had them in Northeast Texas. They were everywhere. And it took us just to get folks out there about 24 hours or so before we could get out there and just meet with folks and shake their hand and tell them it's going to be okay. So having these regional operations centers across the state is part of our plan to do that. So, and another thing out there that came about is, and I say this truly, I'm not being sarcastic, with all love and appreciation to our partners and to our vendor partners in this room and who aren't.
Vendors, listen up.
Yeah.
This one's for us.
So helpful, so committed to the public mission. But I gotta say, when you're in an incident, that is not the time to call. It's not. It is not the time to call and say, here's why my tool would have been better, or here's all these things. Like, please don't.
But Mandy, I can help you.
I know. So that's why events like this and other events where you get out there and you build the relationships beforehand are so important, so you know who to trust and call. And I know, and again, the vast majority of folks were not just trying to sell, and I know it was from helpfulness. And they were even saying, well, we'll do it for free. But not everybody can take free. Like, that's, sometimes that's just another 4-letter F word, and you can't, we just can't do it. So anyway, that also, we built something in statute that helps to accommodate for those things. So, just having some awareness around that. One other piece on communications that we put into our after action that I think was, well, I know it was a blind spot, and I put it out there to you. We were communicating with the media. We were communicating with leadership. We were communicating with the impacted entities. We weren't communicating with the others, our customer agencies who were not impacted, who wondered, are we next? Because they didn't have all the details. So they were worried and they were concerned because they didn't know what it looked like. And so building out, we have those communication channels and we can send that out, and it's a different message that goes to them. But sort of the angst that's understandable that comes from those folks wondering if they're next, we were so focused on who was hit that we didn't get to the others. So that's a tip there that we learned.
Okay, great. Oh, do you have something to add, Mike?
I just think to add to that a little bit, when it comes to a law enforcement perspective, I think some of the questions you want to look at when you're doing your after action is, did we escalate fast enough? And what did that escalation mean? Did we notify the right person? Did we notify law enforcement too quick? Did we notify them too late? And then did every stakeholder know their role? And did every stakeholder that needed to be in that room, were they in the room? You might learn afterwards that maybe you should have had somebody else. Procurement, I think we talked about up here, is maybe somebody who wasn't in the room in the beginning, and now maybe they should be in the room, or your legal team, or whoever that is, a vendor, maybe they need to be in that room. And then now my new hat, in my new role, what keeps me up at night is that third-party risk management and exposure of our supply chain, and what visibility do we have on that? Because again, the old cliche is we're only as strong as our weakest link. So,
Excellent, thanks. Yeah. Oh, go ahead.
And I also want to echo what he said, that it's really important to loop in your procurement professional, because what they're going to do is while you are trying to attack and address the crisis, we're going to be behind the scenes to ensure that you are meeting procurement rules, because as you know, once you've addressed the crisis and everything's settled, the next thing will be is, well, how did they pick this vendor? Did they follow statute? So it's really important to loop the procurement because we want to partner with the rest of the team.
I bet they gave it to him for free. That's why they picked him.
Yeah, when I was a state CISO, I bought so much stuff during COVID. It was really a great opportunity to take advantage of streamlined procurement, so it's really nice. So, we've kind of talked about in the after-action review, you want to talk about what did we do well, what did we not do well, what things maybe should we have done that we didn't do. Can the panel quickly discuss, what do you look at when it comes to your relationships and your partnerships? How do you address that if something didn't work out right? Mandy talked kind of about maybe a vendor calling and at the wrong time and saying, "Oh, you should have done this," or maybe a vendor that you were working with that didn't respond well. Can you talk about how you kind of repair those relationships or address the vulnerabilities in those relationships?
I think Mandy and Nikki hit it on the head that these relationships have to be built way out ahead of time. Again, from the law enforcement perspective, every major city in the world, in the country here, has a cyber fraud task force, whether it's the Secret Service, whether it's the FBI, whether it's CISO. We have those task forces out there to build those relationships and make sure they're in order when a crisis does happen, because the last thing I want to be doing as a head of a federal agency is be standing in front of a governor having an argument during the middle of a crisis. So again, there's plenty of opportunity to build those relationships prior and maintain them and foster them.
I think it depends on who the partners are. But I mean, those of you who know me, I'm happy to have candid conversations and just speak some truth about what worked well and what didn't. And because there are certain partners that you want to keep those relationships. We're all human. Everybody makes mistakes. And most of those are not fatal. And so for those partners that we want to keep working with, it's crucial to have those conversations and to build back to where we are, again, assuming good intentions, and sometimes people just have missteps. There's some others that, you can just say, well, that's just somebody we can cross off the list and not have to work with in the future. So, I mean, there's that. But for the most part, we rebuild and move on.
I would agree. Ongoing partnership is important because we have different viewpoints and we're here to kind of balance each other out. So having that ongoing communication, this way we'll be able to fill the gaps and take a look at the terms and conditions, because depending on where the oversight was, we might need to reevaluate the procurement template so that we can assist with service delivery.
All right, I'm coming out into the crowd. We're asking you all some questions, how it went. The first question I would like to ask to the table, looking for some hand raises here. What worked well amongst your groups? What was going well?
I'll take this side of the room. You guys look smarter.
No can do, sir. Wait. There we go.
First of all, thank you for this exercise. Lots of fun, lots of energy in the afternoon. We didn't think about blaming until you mentioned it. We immediately started brainstorming, collaborating, talking, which is exactly what you want to do, is just opening those lines of communications. But the one challenge we had is we hadn't introduced each other, and ourselves yet. We didn't really even know each other's roles when we did it. So just taking the time to understand who does what. But just the ability to get together and talk goes a long way, and it's so powerful with tabletop exercises.
Agree, and I think something real important is understanding their perspective. Like, there's a reason why those elected officials needed to get out there. There's a reason why that vendor was trying to protect and make sure that they weren't taking the entire blame on something unnecessarily. They have a reputation to protect as well. Each person is trying to do their role. Those procurement people, We love them. We do. We have to say that. They're trying to keep us out of trouble. Those lawyers, they're trying to keep us out of jail. Come on. At the end of the day, they're trying to keep us out of the headlines. Each person at the table, each person doing one of those roles was there for a reason. We need to respect what they're trying to do and understand it and practice it at these tabletops. What about your smart room over there?
I don't know. I think that they're not able to communicate efficiently the brilliance of their thoughts. Yeah, you want to share something?
Do I have to stand? I'm just going to be loud instead. I think what I appreciated about our group work was that when it came to examining the scenarios, everybody was willing to throw out concerns regardless of their role, right? Whatever's top of mind, whatever's on your mind, you can share it. But then once that's out there, the team looked to the subject matter expert, right? Like now that we've posed this question, we have this, we're not looking at everyone for the answer, we're looking at the best person to give us the answer, and then we go from there.
All right, all this good talk, let's talk about the other side. What was causing the most friction?
JPL, can I say something to that?
But of course.
She brought up a really good point. So with the ICS structure, you're going to have an incident commander. You may even have a couple of them. So in a cyber incident, I'm sure that Mandy can definitely attest to this, but you're going to have your incident commander who is your lead for the cybersecurity event. And then we'll have a liaison from our Office of Emergency Management over into our EOC, but then our EOC 2 will be activated, and you'll have another incident commander that is, I guess, what would you call that, Andy? The second incident commander that is over in the EOC, and then we send over one of our cyber people to be a liaison in the OEM as well, so that you are communicating and you're translating the same information that's going on between your EOC, I guess, and then where we've activated the incident. I keep going back and forth because, you know, I work out of our administrative building, but our EOC is headquartered in the sheriff's office. So in a major event, we would stand up the EOC. I would probably be responding there. And then we'd have a liaison at the administrative building helping all of our satellite locations and so forth.
Yeah, the incident command system, it's a formal structure. You can download free training from the FEMA website. They also will come out and do training. Your local emergency management crew will probably do training for you too. I know that when I was at the state, I actually was not the incident commander. We had our CTO do that, our Chief Technology Officer. I was his deputy. Most of the major incident command positions had deputies in there. But it allowed me to have a larger oversight of the big picture of what was going on while he worked the problem. And so since I had a lot more incident command experience, it was really a great setup. So think about who the best person is for that, and that person might not need to be your incident commander. JPL, do you want to ask another question, and then we'll go back to the panel?
Yeah, I want to know where the most friction was. Where was that kind of generated there with the decision making that you were doing? And how did decision making feel when you had such scrutiny from all those other roles trying to balance it? Thoughts? Anyone? Anyone have, oh?
And
From
my
the good
side
side?
can participate too if you want.
I think one of the things we saw at our table is not really knowing. We kept referencing this magical incident response plan, not actually seeing that. It was really hard to kind of guesstimate what those actual next steps were, who else needed to be involved, when do we engage the governor and the public sector. We didn't have that run book in front of us, so we were all just kind of making it up as we went. So I think that was, you know, plan ahead, and this was really fun to kind of see and test that out.
Anyone
that
else
is a good point.
want to talk about any kind of friction that may have come up?
Andy, I was going to just to elaborate what she said, that is a good point. And in our incident response plan, our IT daily operations remain the same. So it explains what the manager of the network team is, what the manager of the systems team is, what the role of the service desk team is, and it goes through those job descriptions, I guess, or duties, and then it even alludes in the event of a cyber incident, we're not going to have our systems engineer step over to the network. That's not going to happen. We still need you to serve as our subject matter expert on our servers team. So it really is changing in the roles of, my CIO has designated me as incident commander always, so I'll work with the director of OEM to always lead a cyber incident, but then we have our security engineers, our stakeholders from the state of Colorado, procurement, finance, public communications, engaged.
1 minute rapid fire from the panelists. Final thoughts. We'll start down with you, Mike.
Plan ahead. Tabletops. Communicate.
Didn't even use his whole minute. Mandy, he cedes his time to you.
You want to go? Oh, you okay?
That was a minute total.
I know. Ditto. I think, and I really, again, going back to the point about who's leading it, in the what do you call ICS, that I think that's so important as part of your planning it, but also knowing your team and knowing their strengths and letting the folks, you may be putting someone in charge who really doesn't know anything about cyber, but they're really great at running an incident, at keeping calm, at knowing who to call, and then that lets your experts be able to get out there and do the things that they need to do where they're not just trying to herd cats and manage communications and personalities.
And I would say, I would agree, plan ahead. As you're working with the vendors, you want to make sure that the contract that you have, the terms and conditions, and the technical assessment that you apply to the contract is all in place, because that's what's going to help you at the end, is to be able to hold the vendor accountable for their actions.
And I'm going to say the same thing. Plan ahead. And I say that because we're never going to stop threat actors, but our job is to make it hard for them to get into our systems. That's our goal at the end of the day, so that then they move on to another system. That's something that I think about, and then also plan ahead, because I have spent many months in the EOC, not for a cyber incident, but for an avalanche incident, a flooding incident, a fire incident, away from my family, away from my girls. And we're talking 3 weeks, 4 weeks, 6 weeks. It's exhausting, and the last thing that I want to do is spend weeks in my EOC. I love my people, but I would rather be with my family.
I do want to add something. Kind of a fun thing to do in a tabletop is halfway through inject a scenario where your incident commander drives his car off the side of the road and can no longer participate in the incident, or not the incident commander, but whoever the lead person is. And that is a way to really, the reason I say this is you'll see a lot of teams, if their manager or leader is in the room, they won't make decisions. They won't offer their ideas because they don't want to, they don't want to be different than their boss. And so removing the boss from the equation, I think some of the most proud moments I've seen in a room is when I removed myself from it and watched my team step up and make decisions and see what decisions they would make that maybe I wouldn't have thought of. So that's kind of an interesting thing to put in there. One other thing I want to talk about with the panelists is, do you have any recommendations on specific frameworks like NIST or anything from CISA? You want to talk about that at all?
Yeah, incident command structure. So that's a framework that we follow for our cyber incident response plan, but we do follow the CIS controls, which is a subset of NIST. We do have NIST as well because the FBI has aligned their CISO security policy with the NIST cybersecurity framework. So it kind of, there's many different frameworks that we follow, but our primary frameworks is ICS in incident response, and then the CIS controls. And totally separate from cyber is I responded to the Boulder King Super shooting that happened maybe 4 years ago or so. And I have to say that Mike Chard, who is the emergency manager for Boulder County, he's been through so many incidents. And I have to say the Joint Information Center that he stood up, it was filled with about 300 partners from state to local to private to the feds, ATF, to, I mean, you name it. He has tested his incident response plan so well that that response went so smoothly. And with that many stakeholders involved, even with the victims and so forth and the families, it was one of the most successful events and I guess actions from a very tragic event that has happened. So always, testing those plans is so critical.
I think we've heard that a couple of times today. That might be a big thing. Go ahead and test these out. I want to thank all of you all who obliged us by participating, by moving and sitting with some stranger danger people that you didn't know, taking on roles that maybe weren't your own. Thank you for doing that. I want to give a round of applause to our distinguished guests up on the panel for sharing your insight, for having to go through it the hard way, but to learn lessons and share them with us to maybe save us a little time on the back end. And of course, my co-moderator here, Mr. Andy Hanks, want to thank you for getting
Thank
together.
you.
Absolutely. And last but not least, GovRAMP. Thank you for taking the time and realizing that practicing this matters. So Stacy, a couple comments out of you.
Thank you. Take this back to your offices with you and talk to your teams.